Shabbat Shalom. Now, our Torah portion is Tsav. We're just going to jump right into the overview of the entire portion. So it starts off with the duties of all the sacrifices. This is the repeat from last week's Torah portion. Then you have, again, the eternal flame at the brazen altar. And then you have what priests are allowed to eat. This is the sin and guilt offering. And anything that is the remainder of the grain offering. Then you have the instructions of the peace offering eaten by not only the one who is bringing it, but also the priest. And this Torah portion concludes with the 7-day inauguration within the sanctuary. So for weeks, the Torah has walked us through every precise measurement of the tabernacle, every thread of the priestly garments, every specification of the sacred vessels. Now in our Torah portion, the blueprint becomes a living reality. Moses ordains Aaron and his sons. The sacrificial fires are kindled. Israel's new covenant relationship with the Holy One finds its tangible expression. Also, the parashah continues the laws of the sacrifices from last week's Torah portion, but with a significant shift in vantage points. You see, if you lay them side by side, the ordering of the sacrifices in last week's Torah portion, Vayikra, it begins with the self-motivated offerings. You have first two, the burnt offering and the grain offering, and then the peace offering before moving to the required sin and guilt offering. The sequence here is person-centered. It starts with the human longing to draw near to God, only then addresses the consequences of human failure. In our Torah portion, Tsav, the sequence shifts towards the priestly administration from their perspective. The focus moves to the Kohanim, the handling of the sacred fire, and the protocols that govern the sanctuary's ongoing life. This double perspective is not accidental. Together, these Torah portions, Vayikra and Tsav, give us a complete picture of an encounter that requires both the worshiper's heart and the mediator's faithful service. One of Tsav's notable additions is to carefully detail of what the priests may take from each portion or burnt offering. For example, you have the burnt offering, and they are required, and they can have the skins of that offering. The grain offering is anything that is remainder. You have the sin and guilt offering. This may be eaten by the priests. And then the peace offering. You have the brisket, which is the chest and the right shoulder. These are not just provisions, they are the priestly sustenance, declaring that those who serve at the altar, they live by God's grace. Also, each category of the sacrifices carry a distinctive spiritual logic. Understanding them is the foundational to understanding what Yeshua accomplished and what our own worship is supposed to embody. For example, when you look at the burnt offering, this offering was totally consumed on the altar with nothing reserved for the worshiper himself. It expressed total surrender to God. It was not primarily atonement for specific sins, but rather a declaration saying, all of me belongs to you. Only those who stood in the covenant could bring this offering. And any who had fallen into serious sin had first needed to be reconciled through a sin offering before they can bring their burnt offering. The burnt offering tells us that a life offered to God must be a life already reconciled to the Lord. Next, we have the mincha, or the grain offering, which consists of flour, oil, and frankincense. These are the basic staff of life, the symbol of abundance, and the frankincense and the fragrance of prayer. This offering acknowledged that God is sovereign over the material world. It recognized that every harvest, every loaf of bread, every provision of the household comes from the land of and from the hand of the Creator. This offering teaches us that worship and praise is not only the position of a crisis or a specific need, but the desire of ordinary gratitude. Next, we have the sin offering. This addresses unintentional sin, the failures that rise from the weakness of human nature rather than from deliberate defiance of God. Also, the laying of the hands upon the animal's head symbolized the transfer of the worshiper's sin to the sacrifice. Through the sprinkling of the blood of the sacrifice, the soul of the offerer was brought back into fellowship with the divine presence. This was propitiation in its concrete form, an innocent substitute bearing what the guilty one could not carry. Moving on to the guilt offering, unlike the sin offering dealt with a person who sinned unintentionally. The guilt offering functioned as a target ransom for specific offenses, such as transgression of ignorance in the holy things of the Lord, or transgression of any of the law, or a fraud or suppression of the truth, falsehood of a neighbor, rape of a betrothed slave, and the purification of a leper. The guilt offering addressed not only the guilt of a negative action, but its damage, the injury sin causes to the fabric of not only community, but the covenant. And a ram's blood was shed, restitution was paid, and the relationship was restored. Next, we have the peace offering. Within here, we have 3 different types of peace offering. One for thanksgiving, one for vow, and then a free will offering. Perhaps this was the most intimate of all the offerings because it was the sacrifice of fellowship. Unlike the burnt offering, most of the peace offering was eaten, shared among the priests, the offerer, and the offerer's household in a sacred meal, like I like to call a holy barbecue, that celebrated, restored, and sustained communion with the Lord. And also, there are special occasions that this offering can be brought, such as public inauguration, election of the kings, important occasions, Feast of Shavuot, and all the other feasts, and the expiration of a Nazirite vow. Whether in thanksgiving, in the fulfillment of a vow, as a free will expression of joy, the fellowship offering said, God and I are at peace, and I am celebrating that peace at his table. So on the surface, the inauguration of the priest in our Torah portion seems flawless. In Leviticus chapter 8:36, it says that Aaron and his sons did everything God commanded. The system is operational. Everything is going according to plan. But just in a few chapters, moving on to next week's Torah portion, in Leviticus chapter 10, we see that Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, are struck dead for offering a strange fire before the Lord. So the question has to be asked, how can a system that appears so well ordained go off the rails so suddenly and so terribly? The answer lies in what the text never explicitly says, yet assumes throughout the Torah, the absolute necessity of kavanah, the motivation and the attention of the heart. In the aftermath of this misfortune, Moses confronts Aaron about why the sin offering was not eaten as prescribed. Aaron's response is remarkable in the grief-laden wisdom. In Leviticus chapter 10, verses 19 through 20, Aaron, he responds to Moses and he says, look, this day they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord. And then such things have befallen me. His sons just died. And if I had eaten the sin offering today, would it have been accepted in the sight of the Lord? Moses heard this and was satisfied. And God never raises the matter again. Aaron's grief had reduced the required act impossible to perform with integrity. His restraint was itself an act of reverence. A correct external form performed with a wrong or broken internal state is not worship. It is at best empty ceremony and dangerous. Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 23 to 24 says that the very generation that brought sacrifices faithfully while walking according to their own counsels and the view of their evil heart. Or Solomon in Ecclesiastes 5:1, he says, draw near to listen or draw near to hear, rather than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they do evil. The offering without the kavanah is the sacrifice of fools. Now, what is kavanah? This is a Hebrew term for intention, sincere feeling or focus during prayer or the performance of commandments. It represents the soul of a religious act, ensuring it is not merely mechanical action, but a mindful, heartful connection to God. Now, kavanah as a noun does not appear in the Hebrew Bible. It is a rabbinic coinage developed in the Talmudic period. But the rabbis, they understood that prayer without kavanah is like a body without the soul. Its form is present, but its life is absent. But also, there are examples of kavanah. When Samuel tells Saul that obedience is better than sacrifice, when David confesses that God desires truth in the inward parts, the heart, when the Shema commands to love Adonai with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. You see, the Bible is already insisting of what kavanah is. The rabbis didn't invent the idea, they just gave it a word. Kavanah is not simply a matter of paying attention during prayer or worship, though that is part of it. At its deepest level, kavanah is the alignment of the whole person, the mind, the heart, the will, and the desire with the living God. Yeshua made the same point in his rebuke in Matthew chapter 15, verses 8 through 9. He says that this people honors me with their lips, but look, their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me. What God has already desired is not the blood of lambs or goats, but the surrendered heart, for which those offerings were the appointed vehicle. You see, the sacrificial system was never meant to be a mechanical transaction, like a spiritual vending machine, which is you give in the right ritual, and then you get forgiveness on demand. It was always a language of the heart, a structured encounter between the holy God and human beings who acknowledge their need and surrender. When the sacrificial language is broken without its meaningful heart, it just becomes noise. So our Torah portion presents a searching challenge to every worshiping community, including ours. We may have all the externals in order. Our liturgy is sound. Our Shabbat services are well attended. Our prayers are theologically correct. Our community life is structured. But our Torah portion asks, where's the kavanah? When we lift our hands in worship, are we truly surrendering ourselves? Or are we just rehearsing a gesture? When we confess our sins, are we genuinely repenting or satisfying a religious obligation? When we come to the Lord's table, are we examining ourselves and discerning the body, or simply participating in a familiar practice? The good news of our Torah portion is that God does not demand perfection of emotion. The emotional state as a precondition for approach. Yeshua, our great high priest, has offered the perfect sacrifice with the perfect kavanah. We do not earn or manufacture the acceptance he has secured. We just keep the kavanah fire burning. Our Torah portion offers a command. It is the fire on the altar. In Leviticus chapter 6:13, it says, a fire shall always be burning on the altar and shall never go out. The priests were responsible for tending this flame continuously. Through every night, through every season, it was not a fire that was ignited by human hands. We are told that it first came down from heaven, but it had to be sustained by human faithfulness and the intention and motivation of the heart. Each morning, the Kohen, the priest, is to burn the wood on it. And this is fitting. This is a fitting image for the life of prayer and worship to which we are called. This is the priestly task for every believer. We are, in the language of Peter, a royal priesthood. We serve at the altar of prayer, praise, intercession, and service. And the command of our Torah portion stands over our worship. It says, the fire must never go out. The original flame was not lit by human hands, but it must be sustained by our faithful, intentional, wholehearted tending. That kavanah is how we tend the flame. A congregation that goes through the motions of worship without the fire of genuine encounter will find eventually that the altar of our hearts has gone cold. Our calling is not to manufacture the perfection he has secured. It is to tend the flame he has already lit, to bring our whole service and our whole self to the altar, day by day, honestly, attentively, with everything in us aimed at the Holy One, aimed at the one who is worthy. And with that, chazak u'baruch, be strong and be blessed. Let's bring the worship team up.